I think this is the perfect time to take a trip back in time to see some of the past historical events that have coincided with Jupiter, the planet that makes things bigger and more powerful, going into the initiating, sometimes aggressive, sign of Aries. So I'd like you to review these events I'm going to present to you and see if you can pick up on any patterns or make any assessments on themes. I've just picked out the ones I found most relevant, but they're pretty much the biggest things that happened that year. This list is not intended to frighten anyone. This is just history, and though history does not repeat, as Mark Twain said, it does rhyme. My intention is to bring up awareness of certain themes so we can prepare ourselves for the possibilities of these themes maybe resurfacing. Jupiter went into Aries in 1916, and 1916 witnessed two of the most decisive battles of World War I. On the western front of the war, the Battle of Somme began, and the French and British troops were attempting to bring the war to a close, but it just didn't get closed. It didn't get better because the war didn't end until 1918. So this was ultimately the largest battle in the war's history on the Western Front, and it would also become one of the bloodiest fights in recorded history.
Each mile had been bought by over 100,000 casualties.
The next time Jupiter entered Aries was in 1927 and 28. Leon Trotsky was expelled from the Soviet Union Communist Party, and that paved the way for Joseph Stalin to consolidate complete power.
The industrial goals of the five-year plan was an increase in agricultural productivity.
And the Soviet Union entered a series of five-year plans which began in 1928 under the rule of Stalin, and he launched what would later be referred to as the Revolution from Above,
where hundreds of peasants were put together to work on enormous farms that covered thousands of acres. This led to the number of industrial workers almost doubling. Overall productivity remained low in many areas and caused widespread famine in the countryside.
In 1939, World War II starts, and that's when Jupiter entered Aries again in 1939. So World War II started, Germany invaded Poland, France follows 6 hours later, and Austria, New Zealand, South Africa, Canada, all of them entered the war in 1939. The next time Jupiter entered Aries was in 1951, and the Cold War was in full swing.
Let us face, without panic, the reality of our times. The fact that atom bombs may someday be dropped on our cities.
America was fighting in the Korean War, and they were trying to fight back the advance of communism. And Joseph Stalin proclaims that the Soviet Union has an atomic bomb. And there's also the first underground atomic explosion in America at Frenchman Flat in Nevada. So there was a lot of communism, fear, the Cold War, the atomic bombs, all that in 1951. The next time Jupiter entered Aries was in 1963, and the biggest news from 1963 was the assassination of the U.S. President Kennedy, John F. Kennedy.
The man who became 35th president less than 3 years ago is dead. He faced up to communist threats with such firm shows of force that Khrushchev backed down in Cuba, softened the hard red line on Berlin.
At the same time, there was the mounting troubles in Vietnam, and the Viet Cong guerrillas had killed 80 American advisors. So we were going into, the Vietnam War at this point. And also we had the civil rights campaigns. They were really in full swing as well. Civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested. Next time Jupiter entered Aries was in 1975. Now, in the 70s, there was this humongous amount of inflation. In the UK, inflation was at 24.2%. And the price of petrol or gas, there was gas shortages and increased nearly 70% in 1 year.
You mean you didn't take the warning seriously?
No. I just couldn't imagine something like this would happen in America.
The end of the Vietnam War happened in 1975, and the Vietnam War, if you don't know, that's not a happy ending. Communist forces take Saigon, and South Vietnam surrenders unconditionally to the communists. In 1987, Jupiter enters Aries again, and the stock markets around the world crash. After a long period of growth in the United States, the stock market drops 22.6% in one day, and throughout the rest of the world, there are major falls. In 1999, Jupiter entered into Aries, and Y2K was a huge problem that people were worried about. They thought that all of the computers were going to fail.
Elevators may stop, heat may vanish, credit cards and ATMs may cease to function. Airplanes and trains may come to a halt.
Also at this time, the euro was established as a common currency, but interestingly, it was a virtual currency at first in the financial markets before it became a physical currency. The next time Jupiter entered Aries was in 2010 and 2011. There was the ongoing financial crisis from the 2008 crash, high unemployment, and continued house prices still depressed due to the large number of foreclosures. U.S. was continuing to try to spend its way out of recession by creating more jobs. Also at this time, we had the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, and they stopped drilling for oil during that time because of this big oil spill. And then there was the Occupy Wall Street protests and the nuclear disaster at Fukushima Daiichi, the nuclear power plant in Japan. As of actually the day that Jupiter enters Aries, May 10th, 2022, in America, Joe Biden is set to give a talk on the economics of the world, the United States, inflation, and that's going to be highly anticipated to see what he's going to be saying there.
There are two leading causes of inflation we're seeing today. The first cause of inflation is a once-in-a-century pandemic. Not only did it shut down our global economy, it threw the supply chains and demand completely out of whack. And this year we have a second cause, Mr. Putin's war in Ukraine. We saw in March that 60% of inflation that month was due to price increases at the pump.
As the month progresses and Jupiter and Mars conjoin in the sign of Aries, my feeling is that these themes will get even more strong. So the point of this whole entire thing was to be looking back at the times when Jupiter enters Aries, the thematic things that we can see. Unfortunately, war, inflation, and situations where money and the markets are unstable. Just to be aware and to see what could be coming down the lane so we can be prepared.
Did you ever think that this would happen to the most advanced industrial nation in the world?
No, we've been living like ostriches, and we use more than our share of the natural resources. We know this. But, I don't know. We kind of thought it was going to go on forever.
I wish you all the best, and I will talk to you guys next time.